We're going to start with the good. What's the biggest win?
Trump and his administration has secured over $5 trillion in new U.S.-based investments that will result in over 450,000 new jobs.
Let's get to bad. Start with your worst.
The worst, I mean, it's everyone's worst, right? It's the messaging that comes from Trump's mouth and his character. Oh my God, it's inflammatory. You don't need to say what he's saying. The U.S. brand is deteriorating. The U.S. in general has had a very good brand over the past couple of centuries. Hungry, willing, helpful, excited, forward-looking people. And when you have the leader of this world getting involved in childish games, it hurts the brand.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Adventure Capitalist Podcast. My name is Austin Bronner, and in this podcast, we dive deep into the world of investing, adventure, geopolitics, and entrepreneurship. I'm here with my co-host, Cody Shirk. Cody, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm good. I have made 3 big changes to my life this week. You want to hear them?
I do. Yeah. What do we got?
I'm going to go real quick. I deleted X off my phone.
Done. Gone.
I deleted Instagram off my phone. And I switched from coffee to tea. And I'm telling you, like, all 3 of those things may sound very small to the average person, but, you know, it's a big change for me. So I've got to say, so far, like, drastic improvement in life.
What's the big improvement? What can we expect today?
I won't maybe be so jittery from the coffee.
Yeah.
But I think I'm a little bit more, well thought out, as I'm not being bombarded by polarizing stuff from Instagram and X, and my mind's maybe a little bit more at peace.
Kind of like a Zen master.
Yeah, I felt like it was toxic. I've been on it for like years, a decade plus. I feel like it's a part of most people's life, right? You go on doom scrolling, of course, but just like checking what's going on with your friends or the news. And I feel like maybe the algorithms have gotten so damn good on all platforms. It's just like serving me exactly what I want to hear. So maybe it's reinforcing bad
everything
ideas.
is going to piss you off.
Yeah, of course it's keeping me on there, but I'm also like, maybe I'm kind of getting brainwashed. And anyway, so far I feel like a little bit more at peace. So if I'm sitting there like looking at my phone, I like go on my phone, there's nothing to do. I'll look at like the weather app. I'm like, yep, still sunny outside. I'm like, all right, I'll read a book. And I feel like it's probably, I have a prediction that in the next like 5-10 years, we'll look back on a lot of the social media stuff as just like really, really toxic stuff.
I don't think we even need to look back at it 5-10 years from now. I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious. I think everyone knows that, but it's kind of like maybe cigarettes in the 70s. We're like, yeah, this probably isn't the best thing, but like I'm still going to smoke a pack. Now you look at it and it's like a no-go. Cigarettes in general. But I don't think we're there yet with social media. I think still a lot of people know it's bad, but they really haven't taken the step to stop using it.
Well, it's hard. It's hard.
Totally.
I think even if you delete it from your phone, you can still access it through the web browser or whatever, Yeah,
but also I think it's just a part of life. Like somebody sends you something in a text, like, hey, check this out. Or did you see this news article? Or like, look at my friend's baby or whatever. And like, you're just like, oh, I'm on Instagram or on X. And then like 20 seconds later, you're down a rabbit hole. Like, how did I get here?
20 seconds later, you're watching the most insane thing. Somebody is, sliding down ice, hitting a car, and also dumping paint. Just the most, that's on.
Well, that's your algorithm.
You're getting a picture of my algorithm.
You're getting the paint dumping. They know how to really suck you into that one.
Let's do a quick like dive into 50-mile walk.
Yeah.
What do you got? So give me the update. How's it going? When's it happening for you?
I kicked it back later till May. I'm just not going to be able to get it ready. I was planning on this coming weekend, but I just got too much stuff going on. I think I'm pretty physically fit there. I haven't done a super long walk, but I've been running. I've been doing like pretty solid walks consistently, just not the huge distance. And I got the course set out. It's almost exactly 50 miles. So
nice. You going by yourself?
I got a couple people that have reached out, but also got some friends. I don't know who's really going to step up and do it because, this is one of those things where there's a lot of people really passionate about it, a lot of people that really want to do it in their soul. But when it comes to, you know, going at 3
When
in the
the
morning
rubber
to
hits
start
the
this
road.
walk, yeah, I don't know who's really going to do it. I'm going to do it. I've said it so many times now that I can't get back out of it. So I'm committed. I'm
Yeah.
stuck.
I mean, for me, it's a couple, what about three? We get it on the 18th here in Oregon. Got a nice group going. And it's been a nice little inspiration to just continue to get out there and get my cardio up. So doing some running, doing some walking, and it's mostly mental.
Of course.
So
I mean, it's definitely going to be physically painful, but this is much more of a mental push than a physical push, I
totally.
think.
If you're listening and you want to get involved with 50 Mile Walk, just head to adventurecapitalist.com, shoot us an email, and we'll send you some details. We got a great episode today, something that I'm looking forward to chatting with you about. We're thinking about this week. We're like, what do we want to talk about? And we did a lot of episodes. We were talking about what we expected to happen this year. Big change, new administration, lots of things going on. And we wanted to kind of come back together and talk about, it's been 100 days since the beginning of the Trump presidency. And if you, just like you said, if you go on social media or you even any of the news sites, there's really not a like balanced view of what's happening. Either you hear like the worst of the worst, where it's like the end of the world, nothing positive is happening, we're going into a fascist regime. Or on the flip side, you hear of, oh, everything is according to plan. You're just not smart if you don't think, if you're thinking that things are not going well, like art of the deal, that sort of a thing. So today what we want to do is we want to dive into the first 100 days of the Trump presidency, talk about kind of the wins, the things that we think are good, the things we think are bad, and the things that we think are, it's kind of too early to tell.
Yeah, I don't want to make this as like a media, like we're just joining the dog pile of this is good or this is bad. I also want to identify some opportunities, or maybe just put things into perspective of, hey, this is good or bad, but it doesn't matter for the long term. Maybe it's just a short-term noise. And I want to talk that out with you and maybe encourage people to realize that a lot of this is just noise. And 6 months, a year from now, much of it might not matter at all.
Or in some will, and maybe some will.
For sure. Absolutely.
Like,
but I think there's this temptation to get sucked into some narratives and make drastic changes maybe in your life or the way you're investing or
totally.
business decisions. And it's very hard to like poke your head out from the noise and say like, what's actually going on here? So that's what I really want to do.
What are the long-term consequences here, and what does that look like, and how is it going to impact? Let's kind of go. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of go rapid fire. So we'll start, and I'll open it up to you, and we'll start. Why don't we're going to start with the good, and we'll start with the things that, and you can go first, and we'll go through, and you can give us like, what's the biggest win, right? Let's start with the wins, then we'll go to the losses, then kind of go to the things we think are too early to tell. Why don't you kick off with what's been the biggest win so far? Something you've been surprised on the upside for?
This, I don't want to say I'm surprised, but maybe a little bit. It's the immigration crisis that was and is a little bit unfolding on the southern border of the U.S. and really actually the entire U.S. I actually looked in the data. There's been immigration not just along the southern border, but it's been almost all states throughout the U.S. So some quick data. Under President Biden, so the 4 years preceding Trump coming into office, there were over 8 million migrant encounters nationwide, 6.7 million of which have been at the southwest border. There are over 1.7 million known gotaways. I'm using air quotes on gotaways because that's a word that suggests somebody was either contacted or they weren't contacted, maybe seen, and they got away. And they're now living in the United States. So almost 2 million people that are totally undocumented, and we don't know who they are. They've never been vetted. We don't know if they're just a normal person who wants to, make a better life for themselves, or they have.
You're saying 6.7 million got away?
No, 1.7 million got away.
Yeah. And this is just from encounters, people that were actually, we saw them and then they got away.
Yeah, well, no, technically it's 8 million were encountered. 6.7 were on the southwest border. 1.7 were just like they weren't really contacted. We don't know who they are. We just it's a round number. By the way, all the data I'm putting out here is put out by the government, so of course we don't really know what it is. But let's just call it almost 2 million people we know came in, and we didn't talk to them at all. We have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to touch on a couple of data points here, because Trump got elected with saying we're going to shut the border down and we're going to deport all these people. We're going to get these people out of here. And I am a fan of not letting people into our country unless we know who they are. I'm actually a fan of immigration. That's what America has been built upon. I think the more the merrier into the U.S. merit based. We want hardworking, productive, honest people. So that almost 2 million number, that's who we don't know came in. But if we were going to deport those 2 million people, I did some quick math here. Assuming that 200 people fit on a flight, we're going to fly these people out. That would be 8,500 flights at a cost of over $8.5 billion. That's just for the flights. That's not considering
just to get people out.
That's just to get the people out. That's not even considering the paperwork, the lawsuits, the actual manpower to do this. So the point is that it's totally unrealistic to even think we're going to get these people out of the country. And one thing I didn't like, or at least it's kind of been swept under the rug, is that Trump was saying we're going to deport all these people. It's just not even if you wanted to, it's not realistic. But here's the big but. Here's the good part, is that the border crossings, the people coming into the U.S. illegally, has absolutely dropped. I mean, it's just fallen off a cliff. And there is a chart we'll throw up here. It shows the monthly number of people illegally coming into the U.S. And almost for 3 or 4 years straight, it was like 200,000, 300,000, over 300,000 people coming into the U.S.
These are encounters with people, right? So there's also a bunch of people we don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into that much of the weeds, because they classify these different encounters. And, did we talk to them? Did we look at their passport? Did we see them and they got away? Or are we just estimating it because we saw it on a security cam footage? But the point is that the numbers they've fallen off a cliff. And one of my really good friends, who's a pretty big YouTuber, he was one of the first people to go down to the southern border almost 4 years ago. And this was before the media showed up. And he interviewed a bunch of Border Patrol agents as well as local police agencies, and they were overwhelmed. It was a full-on, it was an invasion
crisis. And
he actually ended up winning the National Sheriff's Award for being one of the first people to cover this story. Anyways, he went back down there last week. So this is actually 5 days ago. He went to Arizona, and he said it is night and day. The border's fully locked up, at least in the area that he was in. He talked to the sheriff of that county that he was in, as well as some local police and the Border Patrol agents, the ICE agency, and they said, yeah, it's completely different right now. So according to the data the government's putting out there, as well as my third party reference, my buddy who went down there, he's saying it's a completely different story. So I will give Trump a thumbs up. Good. You are following through with your word on shutting the border down. I'm going to give it a pass on the deportation part of it, just because it's not realistic. But at least we stopped the bleeding. At least we stopped the just invasion of people we don't know who they are.
And some of the numbers, I mean, it's, if you look at like February and March, it's 1/10 the number of encounters of the previous year, actually, of the previous 3 years, right? So if you look at January of 2024, there was 242,000 nationwide encounters. In February of 2025, it's 28,000.
So yeah, and one of the things, just to put this into context, if you're in the U.S. and you're thinking like, does this even matter? Or if you're outside of the U.S., like, what does this impact for the U.S. or the everyday person? And one quick story is my buddy who was down there in Arizona. He went to one of the hospitals because when he first went there 4 years ago, the hospital said, we're getting invaded by people. We simply cannot provide services. So he went back to the hospital and talked to one of the directors and said, like, how's it going? He goes, well, things are much better, but we have tens of millions of dollars of unpaid bills that we're probably going to have to just absorb as this big debt burden. And this is like a private hospital. So the point is, forget about the personal stories. I know it's hard to separate that, but there's a huge financial burden that a lot of those states and the entire U.S. has been put under through this crisis. And I don't know how that's all going to play out, but at least it's stopped, or at least it's been significantly decreased.
And then on the self-deportation, that's also another interesting part of it. There's significant people that are leaving on their own, right?
Yeah, because they're not getting the government handouts like they were. They're not getting they're not getting some of the handouts like they were. They're not getting the pre paid debit cards or credit cards that they were giving out. They're not getting the housing. They're not getting the transportation. They're not getting the free medical services. All the things that they were getting, a lot of that has just been cut down. So there's no real incentive other than wanting to come to the land of the free, home of the brave. There's no programs that are holding their hands through this whole process.
I'll say that one of the things, just from a messaging perspective, right? Regardless of what you think about the policies of this guy, Tom Homan, you couldn't have put a more intense character in place to be the face of don't come here.
He is truly the border czar. If you think of a person with the title czar in it, that's that dude.
He's like the Baron Harkonnen of, there's like the meme of Baron Harkonnen. If you've seen Dune.
I don't know who that is. Who's that?
You haven't watched Dune?
No, I'm not.
Okay,
I'm not
well,
like
you should watch Dune first of all. Dune and Dune 2, they're incredible. But there's this oily Baron who comes out of the oil, and it basically it's Tom Homan. And I look at it from the self-deportation side of things. Regardless of the handouts, whether they get them or not, it's like the writing's on the wall that it's not going to be an easy place to come to going forward. So
yeah, there's that famous interview where they're talking to him. What are you going to do about the kids and the parents that are getting separated? Like, are you going to deport just the parents? He goes, no, it's simple. We'll just deport all of them. Obviously, the deportation probably not going to follow through, but his narrative, or at least what he's talking about, is pretty extreme, and I think a lot of people support what he's doing.
Totally. All right, so that's a win for you. I'll go into one for me. So I'm going to put them together, but there's a little bit of a difference between the two of them. So I'm going to start, really the main one is deregulation, and I'm going to put DOGE in that as well, because they're kind of in the same bucket. I think the big winner here is the American economy. One of the biggest things that hasn't been talked about that much, but is one of the executive orders, was the 1 in for 10 out executive order. So what does that actually mean? It's a deregulatory initiative that requires federal agencies to, for every new regulation that they put in, they got to get rid of 10. And this is an escalation from the previous administration, which was a 2 in, or it was a 1 in for 2 out, right? Now, what does it actually mean? Does it mean that there's a bunch of regulation getting cut? Probably not. It's really, to find 10 to put 1 in, it's challenging to do. But what it has done is really slowed the amount of regulation that is continuing to roll out. That's in my opinion, a net positive. Some people can argue that it's not.
Well, I would say it may not be a net positive for the economy, because the economy may get hit from some things that are being cut. It's a net positive for the taxpayer long term, I hope. And of course, that would be.
Why would it be negative for the economy to deregulate?
Well, there are a lot of government programs and government agencies that actually contribute to the economy. I don't know.
But you're talking about DOGE, not talking about deregulation.
Well, it's kind of both, right? Because DOGE is trying.
I would say that this is very different, because specifically the deregulation, we're not cutting programs. All we're saying is we're cutting regulatory initiatives that stifle growth. DOGE, on the other side of cutting actual programs, right? Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. That can be a net negative for the economy, because where are those categorized? They're categorized into GDP.
Okay, maybe I went down the DOGE topic too much. You're on the deregulation topic.
I'm on. If you think of them separate, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think of them as like regulation that hinders growth, there obviously some you can argue that some of the regulation is necessary and maybe we're cutting too much, and that's a perfectly reasonable thing to argue. I believe that there's too much regulation and we need to cut some of it. So on the deregulation side, I'll first say that that's a win. On the DOGE side, to your point, is the American economy initially a winner in this? I think maybe not, right? It's when you look at like workforce reductions, tens of thousands of people have lost their job in the government. We're looking at was it a 50% reduction at the Department of Education, 80,000 jobs at the VA were cut. They're trying to revert down to the 2019 staffing levels. We're talking about 55,000 civilian jobs cut at the Defense Department. I think that's all positive. I really do. At net, like a net positive. But to your point about like spending, about $30 billion in contracts were cut, 33 billion in grant cancellations, 311 million in lease terminations, and then you need to pay out a lot of these people. So up front, you're paying these people because, when they talk about layoffs, a lot of these people actually got paid out over 6-8 months. So there's an initial cost that would be like a net negative to our economy. I'm just saying down the road on like a long term, you got to, in my opinion, you got to compare it to the alternative, which was absolute record increases in government hiring, record increases in government spending, to be able to come in and just put some level of fear related to you can lose your job if you work for the government. That's a complete turnaround, even if it's not as deep as the cuts as I would have liked.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously I don't disagree with what you're saying. I completely agree with that. I'm very much a small government type of person. So anything that gets rid of this excess spending and waste and bureaucracy, I'm a fan of. I think also what you were getting at too is the increase in the U.S. GDP that is contributed to by the U.S. government, and actually Canada, we've talked about previously, is a perfect case of a country that's getting out of control, where the actual amount of GDP that comes from government operations, government contracts, government agencies, government employment is like over 40% right now. In the US during the Biden administration, and actually during Trump and Obama, and all of them had been creeping up alarmingly high as well. So if we
I think it's over 40% as well.
Okay. So if we can get that trend to go back down, where the GDP is actually being powered by private industry, by entrepreneurs, by the government getting their hands out of the economy, that is a good thing in my book. So I agree with you there.
And I acknowledge on the same time that there'll be some short-term cuts, I think, short-term impacts on the economy, because again, all those people were making money in the government. They were getting paid, and it's kind of like almost like not like a Ponzi scheme, but kind of, because it's just cycling money through.
Yeah, and I think that's the bigger picture here. We're trying to identify future opportunities and try to ignore maybe some short-term noise, but also realize that all of this, we don't know what's going to happen yet. We're just trying to figure out, hey, is this the short-term like storm that's going on, and we're going to have sunny days in several months or a year? And anybody can guess that, but that's what we're trying to sort out. All right, I'm going to the number third one, which is inflation is down. So currently inflation should be coming out in a couple of days, maybe next week for this month. But last month it was at 2.4%. And anybody who is in the US has been going to the grocery store, the gas station, or anywhere you're spending money, you will know that that is a lot lower than it has been. And I would say that is a win. He said to bring inflation down. Whether or not he actually had a role in specifically bringing inflation down,
we don't know.
It's down though. It's significantly down. I do want to mention some economic things to consider, because I think one topic that keeps coming up is the strength of the U.S. dollar and inflation, and that a lot of times gets conflated. The idea is, if you have a strong dollar, you can buy goods from around the world, right? But if you have a strong dollar, it makes it more expensive for other countries to buy goods from us, which makes us not an attractive trade partner. If you have a weaker dollar, the inverse is true, but a weaker dollar usually suggests higher inflation. I believe Trump is trying to do the impossible, which is to weaken the dollar, but also keep inflation down, which is actually kind of almost a contradictory situation. But I do think that's what he is trying to do. So with this inflation coming down right now, my forecast, I think he might actually be able to keep inflation down a bit. But I don't know if he's going to try and weaken the dollar. But if he does weaken the dollar, you know who's going to be a lot of trouble is all these other countries that have currencies. Because if those other countries' currencies start to increase and their value, they're going to become less attractive to trade with, which is going to make the U.S. more attractive as a market that foreign nations will want to buy from. So I didn't want to, I guess I kind of confused a little bit, but my point is the short-term news is good, inflation's down, but the longer-term monetary wars and currency wars going around the world, we are just getting started with that whole game.
Too early to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. But he's done what he said he was going to do, is get inflation down.
I'll go to my next one. So this is one that is probably going to be, it's my opinion here, and some people will take the other side of this. So we haven't seen a lot of tangible outcomes that have been super like positive yet, but I believe this is in the right direction, and that's in the general push for peace, as well as the hire of Steve Witkoff to be like kind of the head negotiator in the Middle East, in Ukraine, in Iran. Uh, Again, the tangible benefits. What have we seen? Well, there was a ceasefire that was brokered in January. 33 Israeli hostages were exchanged for about 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. The ceasefire eventually broke, and there's still a conflict in Israel and with the Palestinians. But I'm going to take kind of like the deeper look at this, and what I think is positive about this. All you have to do is listen to Steve Witkoff talk about his process and how they're engaging in conversations with other countries. For me, that is when you listen to him talk, he's extremely pragmatic. He talks about trying to go look at the other side, really dig deep into what they want, identify what's possible to give them, and come to some sort of a mutual agreement on where things are going. And it's a massive shift in terms of open communication with people, with some of the conflicting parties in the Middle East, with Russia and Ukraine. And I've been really impressed with Witkoff. If you listen to him talk about what happened to him personally, and his son overdosed when he was 22 on opioids. He lost his eldest son, and he said that specific thing has really helped him to connect and bring empathy to a really challenging situation. He goes into Israel, and he was like, I can find connection in places that other people can't because I've lost a son. And I understand what it feels like to be in a position where many of your family members have died. I mean, there's horrible things happening in the Middle East. So he comes in with a really, in my belief, empathetic view, and is really pushing in the right direction. I think long term, again, it's probably too early to tell on the outcome of this because it could escalate into a bigger war. I think we're on the right path, and that's what I'll grade it on. We're on the right path, moving towards peace.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit here. Well, how should I start? Well, I think the elephant in the room is the Ukraine-Russia deal, which has not been pushed forward at all.
As fruitful.
As fruitful. Of course, and then you got the whole China issue, but that's got the trade stuff is getting confused in there. But I think Trump generally wants more peace. I think he's a deal maker. I think he's filled his cabinet with more diplomatic people. And this is specifically in contrast to Biden's cabinet, which with Antony Blinken and his foreign policy was not only very opaque, it was very soft, and we were getting pushed around throughout the world. And I think that was one of the big frustrations for many Americans. I won't go too deep into Ukraine, Russia, because that's almost a polarizing issue. I will just say there's extenuating circumstances there when you have other parties that don't want to make a deal. And I think that Trump is getting woken up a little bit to say, like, well, this is going to be a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. He has not brought an end to the war like he said he would. Another topic I want to bring up, because it is kind of unfolding, is the Houthis in Yemen and how they're being supported by Iran. At the end of the day, the Houthis are bombing or attacking ships in that the U.S. and the whole world is using, correct? Meaning that the world is using these ships to transport products. Yep. And the U.S. Navy has more or less been the world's police, making sure that waterways are navigatable, whether that's through the Suez Canal or through the South China Sea or through the Indian Ocean, wherever it is. We've definitely played world police, and the Houthis are they're asking for it. So I think that's going to heat up more, and I think Trump, unfortunately, is going to have to make a decision soon with Yemen and their supporters, Iran. And I hope that does not get ugly, but I do not see a way that this gets solved very easily. So I hope you're right.
You
with
put that in the bad category.
Yeah, I wouldn't say bad because it's unfolding in real time. I just think that the world is definitely not in like a much more peaceful state prior to him being elected, which I guess is
Yeah,
bad.
I think I'm gonna. I agree. I agree in now that it's probably that we're still there's still lots of chaos. I'm I'm a believer in open communication, and that I think that the door has been open to better communication between countries that, I mean, again, the reality is there was 4 years when Russia and the US didn't talk at all. And I'm a pro on that side. I'm like, that's a better thing for us to be talking than it is to shut the door on any communication.
Yeah,
Let's
and
go to your next.
I'll give Trump credit on that, and which leads into the next one, which is Trump is very open about his communication. I mean, he literally had Zelensky in the White House talking openly on live television, and the world got to see what unfolded. Of course, there's many sides you could pick there, but the point is, this was not happening in a closed door back room. I mean, Biden went months on end without ever speaking to the press. This is the leader, quote, leader of the free world. He's not even talking. So I do appreciate Trump's transparency with his talking, and also his cabinet members' transparency with speaking. Marco Rubio has done a pretty good job as well, being very outspoken and matter of fact, telling things that are good and bad and things that haven't gone so well. What I will say is a bad category, which
Let's stay with good first.
Okay, well, my
What's
next
your
one's
next good one?
bad.
Then we'll go to bad.
Oh man, you getting me out of well, my next good one's it's pretty big. Let me dive into this. Investments in America.
Yeah, dive into it.
All right, let's do it. All right, investments in America. So right before we started to record this podcast, actually, there was a post on X that the White House put out, and it changed some of the numbers a little bit. But the announcement they said is that Trump and his administration has secured over $5 trillion in new U.S.-based investments that will result in over 450,000 new jobs. Now, that's impressive, that number for the monetary number. We're talking trillions with a T, and hundreds of thousands of new jobs. I don't think anybody would really complain about that other than people who just hate Trump for everything. Some of the notables. So the countries that are coming in with big time money, UAE has committed $1.4 trillion over 10 years for AI infrastructure, semiconductors, energy, and manufacturing. The Saudis are coming in at $600 billion for similar commitments. Japan, which is kind of with SoftBank, meaning SoftBank's based out of Japan, but Japan has committed $1 trillion again for AI and tech. And India has just announced $310 billion for investment in specific sectors. Now, all of those numbers, huge numbers from countries, they're over different time periods, and some of the commitments are commingled across different sectors. Yeah. So it's a little bit confusing, but they're big numbers. And then here's a short list of the companies. Apple has committed $500 billion with 20,000 new jobs. NVIDIA, 200 to 500 billion, again with tens of thousands of jobs. TSMC, which is Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, 100 billion. Hyundai, 20 billion. Johnson & Johnson, 55 billion. SoftBank, which was part of that Japan deal I mentioned, 100 to 500 billion. And then I could keep going down the list. Eli Lilly, Merck, Clarios, Stellantis, Chobani, Nippon
Lots
Steel. I mean, all of these are multi-billion dollar deals. I think that the companies that have committed a lot of the money mostly relates to like physical, like we're building a plant, we're building a steel mill, we're building I saw Guardian bicycles, they're building a new bicycle factory in Indiana. There's these car companies committing new infrastructure-based operations. And I think that's a general win for the U.S. economy and the U.S. people. So I think this is I would put this all in a good category.
Yeah, I think this is one of those that it's hard to argue. I think the number, right, the number is such a fluid thing because a lot of it requires big infrastructure projects, and it's easy to write out the number. We'll see how it goes over time. But yeah, I agree with that. You want to have big manufacturing projects brought back to the US because along the way, there's many people that make money and succeed, whether it's the construction industry, down the road to the people actually working in the factories. So
Yeah, and I also just want to give Biden a little bit of credit here because I don't want to dogpile and say Trump is doing all of this. Some of these numbers, not all of them, but a small number of the numbers were kind of pre-committed before Trump through the CHIPS Act. So again, there's some commingled amounts of funds in there, and like you said, we'll have to see what actually comes of this. But if I'm, if I'm Apple, if
Yeah.
I'm Tim Cook, I don't think I'm saying this number and gonna fall back far from it. I don't think he's gonna look too good by committing these huge monetary investments as well as job creation and then not follow through with it. So I'm overall hopeful that this will all materialize.
I'll do one more good, then we'll move to the bad.
Okay.
So the last one is more of a political win, but one that I think it's kind of like a common sense one. On February 5th, Trump signed an executive order called the Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports Bill. And what it basically does is rescind federal funds from educational programs that deprive women and girls of fair athletic opportunities by allowing transgender women and girls to compete in women's sports. So if you look at this from a common sense type move, I think it was a big common sense win. And I think it's like 95% or 90% of Americans actually support this. And one of the main wins from this was it provided a lot more clarity. The NCAA immediately switched rules and said, hey, now you need to compete at the whatever gender you had at birth. That's what you need to compete as. And I look at it as a win for just common sense in general across the US. I saw this ridiculous story where, pool is a big sport in the UK. And at the end, there was this big tournament that was happening in the UK a couple months ago. All these women came in to compete. The brackets kept, going from this large breakdown down to the championship. And in the championship, it was just two trans women competing against each other. That seems completely ridiculous. And this, I think, is a common sense move towards bringing back some level of normalcy, and it's a win for women. So I think that's a big win for me from Trump.
Yeah. Echo your thoughts, and I will say that this is a topic where the Democrats, I mean, that was not a hill for them to die on. That was one of the big reasons. Yeah, this is like one of those topics. Like, there's a lot of things you can pick sides on. This was a losing one for the Democrats, and this was an easy win for Trump. I'm glad he followed through with what he said he was going to do. But it just blows my mind that this is even like a political debate nowadays, and maybe this will be a time or a crazy time we look back on, which is like this whole pandemic era of all these weird things we prioritize, and hopefully this
second order consequences.
Yeah.
Let's get to bad.
Bad. Okay, I got a
start with your
one.
bad. Start with your worst.
The worst. I mean, it's everyone's worst, right? It's the messaging that comes from Trump's mouth and his character. I actually don't think, like, in closed doors, he's a bad guy. I've seen a lot of casual videos and people's cell phone videos. He seems like a pretty nice guy. Like, goes up and makes jokes and talks to kids and is very like thoughtful. But holy smokes, his messaging,
public messaging.
Oh my God, it's like it's inflammatory. It's you don't need to say what he's saying. And I will bring up one tweet that was just posted. I don't know. It was a post because it was across all social platforms, but I'll read it. It just says, this is the starting sentence. Sleepy Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the United States, has allowed millions and millions of criminals, many of them murders. And then he goes on and tells about how he's going to change the border and immigration. Yeah. He could just say that without saying the Biden part.
Totally.
It doesn't help his cause. It doesn't help
the 51st state thing with Canada.
Yeah, just stop.
It's just so dumb, and it pisses off Canadians. It really influenced the Canadian election. I mean, it swung the Canadian election from being a pretty clear win for the Conservatives to them getting decimated. And I think sometimes it's just like, it's almost like it's an immaturity.
For sure. And a lot of other people are talking about, and I agree that the US brand is deteriorating. The US in general has had a very good brand over the past couple of centuries, or however long we've been king of the hill, which is you have hungry, willing, helpful, excited, forward-looking people. And when you have the leader of this world getting involved in childish games, it hurts the brand. And I honestly don't think it will play too much of a role in the long term. I'm saying the next couple of decades, but it certainly isn't helping. And for him specifically as a leader, it's a waste of time. It's embarrassing for him as a person. And if he wants this legacy to go on 100 years from now, if everyone looks back at presidents, this is going to be a major scar and mark on his reputation. Like, he could have done great things, but the way he spoke out to the general public or people that disagreed with him was not professional. So that's a major loss, major bad.
I put it in the same category as like the self-own from the Democrats on some of these ridiculous things that they were wasting their time on. It's a complete waste of time.
Yep. All right.
Yeah, man.
What's your bad thing?
I agree with you. And it will, to your point, like leave a lasting negative taste in people's mouth from no matter what he does. At the end of the day, he'll always be judged upon his messaging.
Yeah.
I'll go with my number one bad is the tariff rollout. And I've talked to so many different business owners who are facing real challenges related to this. And let's start with the biggest mistake. I'm kind of in the category of like, it's too early to tell on how the tariffs are going to work long term, and like how it's actually going to end up. What's the play here? And like, are they going to be able to do this in a way that ends up being a positive? I'm not sure. But the rollout itself has caused so many problems for people that I know who are American business owners, the people that are doing really great things, building businesses, employing people in the US. The reality is that we live in a time where even if you have a company based in the US, you're still going to be buying stuff from other countries. And the lack of clarity around how things are going to change has forced so many of my friends to either cancel purchase orders from that they'd already made. They've either changed the way that they're doing business. I'll give an example. I got a friend who actually kind of blew up in the news because he runs a business that creates weighted blankets primarily for kids with autism. It's a company that pretty much unanimously people would agree it's a good company. He's been running this company for like 12 years. They cannot get the products that he manufactures in the US. They can only get them from China. And he didn't have any tariffs on his products. By the end of this tariff rollout, the cost of his goods, he was paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in just fees. It was so expensive, it actually made him refuse the shipment of these blankets because it was going to bankrupt him if he took these blankets in. So that, combined with another friend who runs a company who does, it's like auto parts resale. He's like, frankly, we just can't get these products in the US. And I'm in this level of uncertainty where I don't know, should I, increase my prices right away? There's so much chaos, and the second order consequences of this really gnarly, herky jerky rollout. It's putting people who are trying their best in a position that they don't deserve to be in. And I just highly disagree with the way that it's been done.
So this was one of my predictions at the beginning of the year, which I got a lot of blowback for. I said tariffs are going to work. And I'm still, I don't know. for myself, I fundamentally believe that tariffs are needed to get the US out of the situation which it is in, which is we are just not able to trade effectively. And there's a whole number of reasons why. I'll give a quick example, which is the environmental regulations within the US are too strict to manufacture many things. So we import lots of things from countries that have not as strict environmental regulation. So this tariff is supposedly to protect what we're protecting the environment. I'm summarizing this too much, but the point is that there are situations that the U.S. has gotten itself into where we cannot manufacture domestically, but we're also importing things that we're just offshoring our pollution or whatever it is. I think tariffs are a way to at least somewhat equalize the playing field for international trade. And I think they can be used for the US to make themselves or to make ourselves more competitive. Now, that said, my prediction of tariffs working, I did not anticipate this just cluster F of a rollout and this confusion. And a lot of Trump supporters will say, well, this is his strategy, right? This is the art of the deal. This is the come in super aggressive and then we'll meet somewhere in the middle. This is the intimidate your opponent and they'll bend over backwards to appease you. And maybe that is part of his story, but it's not okay to do that when you have hundreds of millions of Americans that are depending on a lot of the results of these tariffs, and we don't know what's going to happen here. And one of the things we've talked about with a good leader, we talked about with Mike Studeman on the last episode, was having a leader that creates a clear path with a clear destination, and that will get buy-in from your followers. And Americans as a whole, I don't think understand the path. They certainly don't understand the end goal here. And there's rollout is just making it worse. So my prediction that tariffs will work, or at least the idea that they'll work, I'm still hopeful that we'll get there. I'm getting less confident with the way it's rolled out that the end goal will be achieved.
I mean, just an example, I've been trying to purchase glass water bottles, right? And I have been in talks with Chinese companies. I've been in talks with American companies. There's so much chaos in these conversations. First of all, the American companies are, even if they're based in America and they're doing half their manufacturing here, some of it in China, like they're still connected to China. So they don't know how to price and give me like accurate pricing on how much it's going to cost if I place a purchase order with them. The Chinese companies are also unsure of how they're going to be able to price. So I can't even get pricing on these glass water bottles. These Chinese companies are trying to shift things to Vietnam, and that's confusing. So I've got now multiple Chinese manufacturing companies that have already set up some manufacturing in Vietnam previously to try to avoid this. So we're trying to get pricing from companies that are based in China, but also running things in Vietnam. It's super confusing. And yeah, I just think that it's been a nightmare.
To bring up one other topic within this topic, which I think needs to be addressed, which is this whole tariff war has more or less been about China. And
it's completely about China.
Yeah. So many other countries have been caught somewhat unfairly in this mix. I think a lot of countries were charging tariffs that were out of control for the U.S. in general, and that should have been corrected. But they've been very, very secondary, third, fourth, fifth tier in the trading importance ranking. And so a lot of countries are pissed at us now. A lot of people are pissed at us now, and this whole tariff rollout has just made everything worse. But I do want to state that I think the whole relation with China and the U.S., yes, it's about trade, but there's a bigger picture going on here. Let's just acknowledge what's going on. There's two superpowers basically fighting for influence over the world, and the U.S. may be talking about trade and these imbalances that exist, but it's also about trying to deplete the Chinese economy to make them not as strong. And if we look at it through that lens, the actual trade imbalances and what may happen in the short term with our economy become less important. So if the deep state thinkers, of course, there's no deep state with Trump, but if there's the deep state thinkers within the U.S. government thinking about trying to weaken China through this trade war, I think that's a bigger story.
And you're joking about the no deep state with Trump, right?
I'm joking because he says there's no deep state, but of course there's a bunch of.
I mean, it's kind of crazy that just from the perspective of like he still it's very clear that there's a lot going on that he still doesn't know about. He's like, he doesn't have information about certain things. Like, why doesn't he have information? He's the president. I don't know.
But that's also how the government works. I mean, especially in the U.S., we have hundreds of military bases around the world. We have an embassy in every single country. How could he possibly know everything?
There's no way.
He doesn't. That's the part of that's the deep state, right? That's these lifelong government officials that are not elected, and I think many of them are good. I think most of them are good, and they are operating status quo. But my point with what I'm getting at is that there's this bigger story here, which is the U.S. fighting for world dominance. And this trade war is one component of this world dominance game. But if the U.S. truly wants to be the superpower over China, then this trade war is one large component of tackling. And this messy situation which we're in right now, which consumers and business people are very frustrated about, maybe not acknowledging or choosing not to acknowledge this bigger picture of what is going on.
Well, the reality is the bigger picture doesn't matter when you're just trying to run your business.
Of course.
And does it even matter?
Put food in your mouth.
It's like, I look at it and I'm like, well, if you're still placing a purchase order from a Chinese company that's just manufacturing in Vietnam, is that solving anything? Not really, Let's get to the next bad one. What else you got?
I got my list all messed up here. You gotta help me out here. Where are we?
I'll go with one.
Okay.
Signalgate. I think this is like you gotta hold standards across administrations, and for Signalgate, in a very, if you want to break it down in a very small, digestible format, it's adding the editor of the Atlantic to a signal group to talk about a strike on the Houthis was completely insane. I don't know how that happened. And the way I look at it, I actually don't care as much about him being added to the group. I just am annoyed that you talk about transparency and then you're talking about this stuff on a signal chat with disappearing messages. I would be upset about this if it was happening on during the Biden administration or any other administration. You can't talk about transparency and then do something different and not be held accountable for it. And who knows, right? Like how many other signal chats are going on that are not, that we're not aware of. But I imagine there's many, many, many. And that's just it's a big black mark in my mind.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me, to be honest with you. Not because I don't think it's wrong or not because it wasn't embarrassing, but just because I think there's so many things like this going on, good, bad, and different, just weird communication channels. And I think we're in the day of, from this day forward, there's just going to be so much more stuff that's made public and is more transparent because of technology. I can only imagine what was going on 50, 100 years ago with secret notes being passed around and scandals and all kinds of stuff. And I think we're becoming more shocked about what's going on because the public finds out about it sooner. So again, I'm not
shocked. I mean, I think it's always been going on. I'm just saying if you're gonna make a stand and say, hey, the previous administration wasn't being transparent, and then you're not transparent,
right? But this topic on Signal wasn't like something that needs to be transparent, was it?
Oh, I think it should be in a government channel so that there's a paper trail.
Well, I guess that's what I'm getting at. I think there are communication channels that shouldn't be government specifically. If it's people talking again, I'm going back to 50, 100 years ago. Old presidents and old politicians used to go out on ranches and get drunk and shoot guns and ride horses for a week and make deals happen. I don't think that should be public knowledge. I think that's how the world works. I think that's how business deals get done. And
I'm going to stand on this one. Me, I don't like it.
Okay. All right.
Okay, let's get to too early to tell. What do you got? Too early to tell.
Well, we can go back to the tariffs a little bit. I don't want to beat that dead horse. The manufacturing push, which actually somewhat relates to tariffs, meaning one of the big secondary effects of tariffs, right, is to increase manufacturing, give more motivation for companies to invest in America. We already talked about all the investing. I just don't think we can do it. I would love if we could do it. I would love if America could be self-sustainable and rely on its own manufacturing. I just don't think we can do it for a number of reasons. Number one, energy consumption. We do not have enough energy to ramp up our manufacturing base significantly. Number two, supply chains. You can manufacture a widget or you can put together a mic stand that I'm talking into right now, but where are you getting the metal? Where are you getting the paint? Where are you getting the screws? So the supply chains. And then the third one, which is the biggest one that's very hard to nail down, is our society is not prioritizing young people or students or college graduates to go work in a factory. It's almost looked down upon. You know, when you were growing up, it's not like your parents like, hey, when you grow up, you should go be stamping, steel in a car manufacturing plant. Of course, there's robotics and AI to take care of a lot of that, but there's people have to fill in the middle there. So I don't think we have the cultural um, drive, support, or even the will within like younger people to want to go work in a manufacturing facility. So I think I like the idea of it. I just don't think it's going to materialize like everyone thinks it will or can. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not looking too positive about it, even though I like the idea.
Yeah, I'll say I'm also in the too early to tell camp on that. I think the rollout was annoying, and I don't think it could have done better. I think the long term of whether or not we're able to reshore some of our really critical industry that keeps Americans safe. I mean, everyone saw it. You don't want to have all your pharmaceuticals being manufactured in China. I remember on Twitter there was like this issue where there's tons of rain in southern China, and they were tracking the Three Gorges Dam, which is the largest dam, and I think it's the largest dam in the world. And they were taking video shots, and it was looking like it might buckle because of the record rain. And if that happened, it would have wiped out most of the pharmaceutical manufacturing in the area below the dam. There was a lot of talk about if that happened, we might be, weeks, months of time where you just completely lose access to prescription drugs that keep people alive. That's not good. We want to have multiple points of failure on pharmaceuticals, on chips, on defense, like drones. We need to bring back drone manufacturing to the US because drones are going to be, whoever can manufacture drones in the future at scale, they're going to be the world power. You can't compete with drones. All of our fighter jets, they'll just get wiped out. There's so many issues with us having our critical defense, pharmaceuticals, all those things in China. And again, back to your point, like almost all of this is about China. So I think it's too early to tell. If we look 4 years down the road and we bring back some pharmaceutical manufacturing, all these different things, great. Even if there's a cost to the economy, I'm
and that may be one of Trump's strategies with this tariff war is to not only weaken China and lower the amount of trade we're doing with them, but also diversify our supply chains. One good example is, you remember the hurricane that happened about a decade ago in Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico is was a big pharma manufacturer, and there was a saline shortage. They have saline for IV bags because they were something like all of them, not all of them, but most of them were manufactured in Puerto Rico. And then there's this huge crisis in the 48 states. So I think that looking at manufacturing and all that, I think part of the U.S.'s strength will also be diversifying our supply chains outside of China, which I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah. You got too early to tell, or want me to go?
I mean, DOGE, but I think
we hammered DOGE.
Yeah, the one frustration I have with DOGE is just we don't really know what's going on, and maybe that's part of the magic, right? Like we hear these snippets of this was cut, or did we discover this fraud or whatever, but we don't really know what the end result is. And by the way, 100 days is not that long considering what's going on. If you think of the US as a company and a new CEO comes to the company, we're basically doing like a turnaround of a company in 100 days. People are trying to get a scorecard. It's like, okay.
Especially because a lot of it's being fought in court.
Right. Yeah. There's all kinds of exterior forces and different levers being pulled.
I'll go with a clear one for me, which is too early to tell. That's abolishing or completely restructuring the Department of Education.
Oh, I'll fight you hard on this. Let's go.
It's too early to tell. I think I don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. The goal, right? I actually I'm aligned with the goal, which is increase and improve American education. I don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. And I think that it's kind of a big black box. We're like, well, we're going to experiment here and see what happens if we completely restructure this. And 4 years from now, we'll have a better idea.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that's a win. I would prefer the Department of Education just gone altogether. I think one of the best examples is
but take the other side. What if it actually has a very negative impact on American education?
I don't think it can. That's the point. Like, it's gotten so bad that it can't get any worse.
Well, it could get worse.
Well, you got eighth graders you got high school students that can't even read. I mean, what's worse than that? One of the highest literacy rates in the world is in like Cuba. And then we have high schoolers that can't even do simple math or can't even write an essay. I mean, what's worse than that? I mean, it's.
I agree. It could get worse. That's what I'm saying.
I don't know. I mean, but okay.
It hasn't magically solved. That's my point.
Yeah, but that's the point. Is that there's an interesting chart. Let's see if I can find it after we record this and throw it up here. But it's the increase of the budget for the Department of Education.
Yeah.
Correlated to actual educators
Decrease
versus the actual people working in admin roles. The admin roles explode in numbers of people working in admin, and the actual educators it's almost flatlined. Simultaneous to that, test scores, literacy rates, math and science grades all are declining at the same amount. So it's very clear to me that there's a correlation of
I think something had to be done. I'm not saying something doesn't need to be done. I'm interested to see what the outcome ends up being.
I don't think it's the federal government's responsibility to dictate how, why, when states should be rolling out their education programs. I actually think that's a state's responsibility, and you can actually point to states that are operating very well versus ones that aren't operating well. And that's one of the unique things about America is that you can move within America to states that are better run, have lower taxes, higher taxes, better services, worse services. And I think education is one of them. And property taxes, actually, if you pay your property taxes and look at your line item, a big line item is going to public schools. And that's collected from the state property taxes.
Yeah.
So I just think that I don't think the federal government should be involved there. So I'm fine with them just blowing up the entire department.
I'll throw one more out there, which I guarantee will be some red meat for you. I think it's too early to tell with dismantling USAID on what the long-term impact of that's going to be. Now, here's why. I fully support. I support it. I think it's the right move. I think it's very hard to quantify what they've done in terms of creating soft power for the US by doing some dirty stuff that creates positive outcomes for Americans. I don't know frankly, it's very opaque. I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. And if we're going to be able to figure out a way to replace whatever they were doing, potentially positive. And yeah, I think it's too early to tell.
Quick story.
I supported it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's too early to tell.
Quick story, and I'm going to answer or give a rebuttal to yours, what you just said, which is I spoke to that company. I'm not going to name the company that you and I were dealing with in Guyana.
Yeah.
That we thought was like some CIA affiliated group. And I spoke to them, and the reason why I spoke to them is because they reached out to me recently and they wanted to know if we could do business. And they casually said on the call that 60% of their global funding, they have offices around the world, is gone because it was coming from USAID.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm getting at is a lot of companies and third-party, whatever, consultants in these groups have completely lost out. And on a lot of that, I'm glad, because I think a lot of us stupid, like providing condoms to whatever refugees in XYZ country, or just extremely wasteful and irrational funding initiatives that didn't make sense. But I do agree with you that I think there's a lot of dirty business that goes on around the world that the U.S. is involved in that is actually beneficial overall for the U.S. I mean, this is a crude way to look at the world, but if you think of, again, the Game of Thrones, I mention this all the time. You look at like one of those big maps and you're an empire trying trying to take over other empires. A big part of it is this like black magic behind the curtain, cloak and dagger strategy, and USAID and what the US is doing in other countries is absolutely important for America staying at the top. So I agree with you saying that we don't know yet, and there's probably some good things that came out of it. I just am very happy with all the waste and fraud and crazy initiatives, people that were on the dole from USAID and other international organizations that the U.S. is supporting right now, or was supporting.
I still am connected with a good amount of people that, I went on a Fulbright fellowship to Macau, which part of that is funded by USAID. And a lot of the people that I know from there continue to be in the foreign service or are in these types of groups. And it's interesting to hear the other perspective of these things getting cut, and we'll see. I want to transition a little bit and get in. Do you have any more?
No, I don't have any more. We're going to do the last one, which is the most exciting one. Maybe not most exciting, but most actionable, and perhaps the most like crystal ball one where we can really speculate and make some money off of, right?
Why don't we dive in?
Do it. Take us away, and then I'll jump in.
You want to talk about crypto?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that has been interesting is we went through a cycle where Bitcoin dumped like almost 30%. Some of these other coins went down 60, 70, 80%. But very quietly, crypto has been pumping back up. And that is very interesting.
Unquiet. It's been very,
What's that?
It's been very quiet.
Been very, 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 very quiet. And I find that to be something that's interesting, because if you're going to give credit, if you're going to criticize Trump for the dump, you also got to give him some credit for the pump. So yeah, what's going on in crypto right now? Give us a crypto corner breakdown.
So the dump, which is basically this pullback in crypto, which, by the way, relative to historical dumps in crypto, this has been not much. But I just want to mention that the recent pullback in crypto is actually pretty similar to other cycles, which is you have this initial pump that takes place over maybe 12 to 18 months, and then there's a pullback, a consolidation, and then you usually have another rip higher. We are in that consolidation phase. So take Trump out of it, take the election out of it, take everything out of it. We're actually kind of just normal in the crypto cycle. So that's happened normally. As it pertains to Trump specifically, of course, a lot of it dumped because there was uncertainty in the world, and crypto has historically been very correlated to the NASDAQ and tech valued companies. You can almost, you can see the chart is almost exactly. However, recently that has diverged, and crypto has started to pump, or at least go up, while a lot of tech has continued to decline in value. Now, the important part about Trump's involvement here is that he has actually done a ton of stuff that has been extremely bullish. And I don't think the average person, especially the average person that's not involved in crypto, has taken note of. So I'm just going to list a couple things.
Give us a rundown.
Okay, so the first thing, which was on January 23rd of this year, he had an executive order called Strengthening American Leadership in Digital Financial Technology. This is a huge executive order. This was the executive order that a lot of crypto people were waiting for, and they wanted this, the strategic reserve announced. It wasn't announced in this executive order, but some of the things that were announced were establishment of the president's working group on digital asset markets. That's the one that involved David Sachs. The prohibition of central bank digital currencies. The pulling back prior policies that were implemented during the Biden administration, especially with Gensler, that was out attacking crypto exchanges, people that were doing transactions in crypto, and individuals that had done transactions. So he revoked a lot of that. Yep. The promotion of stablecoins, US dollar-backed stablecoins, and banking access, and the protection of blockchain activities. So that was on January 23rd. I got more. On March 6, 2025, he established the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and United States Digital Asset Stockpile, which basically said, hey, we have this Bitcoin, we have these other assets like Ethereum, Litecoin, and some other digital assets that were seized during some legal operations. He announced that those are going into a strategic reserve that will not be sold, so more or less a digital Fort Knox. Then he appointed pro-crypto officials, which include David Sachs, Paul Atkins, Hester Pierce, aka Crypto Mom, and Scott Bessent, which most people will know. He's been very outspoken and very well spoken, I think, over the past couple months. Then on March 7th, the next day after he appointed all these people and established the Bitcoin Reserve, he had a White House crypto summit. And most recently, the SEC has been releasing policy shifts, and it's not been the addition of policy, it's been the rescinding policy. Yep. So the lawsuit against Coinbase, the lawsuit against, I think, was it Kraken, Binance, and Gemini, a bunch of the exchanges, they just said, hey, we're not pursuing you in court anymore. Do your business as normal. And the SEC, we believe, is gearing up to implement new ways for people to access the general U.S. banking and financial system through crypto. So that was a long list of things, but those are all things that have happened already that Trump has supported and pushed through and has more or less not been noticed by the general public. Crypto people, of course.
Yeah, I mean, for all the lack of clarity in terms of the tariff rollout, there's been a lot of clarity in terms of crypto. And it's like a skate where the puck is going. Skate where the puck is going policy and understanding that if we want to be on the forefront of finance going forward, we have to move in this direction. So yeah, man, it's been exciting. And that's why I think one of the, when it dumped so hard, everyone was like, what the hell is going on? Because a lot of the structural foundation of the crypto markets and regulation has gotten a lot more clear.
Yep. So Bitcoin has pumped, or it's gone up 10, 20% in the past several weeks. It's very slowly climbing up there. Sui has, we've talked about this a lot. I talked about it almost a year ago. Sui's my favorite. I'm a Bitcoin guy, but I also dabble in some altcoins, and Sui's my favorite. I'm a dabbler in the Sui. And it's pumped like 70% in the past week. But I think the crypto bounce, there's three main things going on here. I want to go over them quickly so people understand what may be unfolding over this next year. So the first one, which is what I already stated, is the normal crypto cycle is kind of resuming. So people who are very familiar with the crypto, let's say, momentum and the cycles, you typically buy when there's a bear market buy, and there's that first pump, and you sell into strength. You sell what you've been holding for several years. You sell for profit because you know there's going to be this kind of peak out and a kind of a dip with a consolidation. And that dip and consolidation phase, which has been happening for the past, say, 3 to 5 months, those people that sold are now rebuying. These people that are rebuying know there's another leg up, or at least according to history, there's been this next leg up, and those people are not selling. So they're bought again, and they're now holding, even though price is coming up a little bit more. They think it's going to rip a lot higher. So that's what's going on in terms of the crypto cycle resuming. The second thing that I think is bullish for crypto is that the trade war is currently, let's say, flatlined. It's not escalating. Let's look back a week, even recently, people are like, "Oh my God,
what's about this? All this is happening in like a month."
It's crazy. Yeah, this is that saying where whatever history happens in a week versus a year or whatever. So I think that the general consumer is getting a little bit more certainty that, okay, this trade war is not going to be as bad as I thought it was going to be. At least things are leveling off. There's there's a little pinhole of light at the end of this tunnel. So I'm getting more confident to take some more risk on and invest in equities, but also in crypto. The third thing, and I talked about this at the very beginning of the show, which is monetary policy going to be changing globally over the next several years, and that is going to be spurred upon by a lot of things. So I mentioned at the beginning of the show about how tariffs are probably going to wreak havoc in other currencies, because countries are going to be fighting for the strength or weakness of their currency in order to be more competitive in world trade activities. Well, if you are holding a currency, whether it's a US dollar, the euro, the yen, whatever it is, they're going to be more volatile, but it's guaranteed they're going to lose value. They're going to lose value in the coming years. So where are you going to put your money? You can put your money in gold. Gold's at record highs right now. You can put your money in real estate. You can put your money in other equities, or you can put your money in crypto. And I think a lot of people are realizing that Bitcoin specifically is the international store of wealth. It's a 24/7 tradable asset. It's decentralized. There's no government that's going to say you can or can't do something. There's a supply limit. There is an essential bank that's going to print more, and people's minds are starting to click, not because they did the research on crypto, but because they're seeing what's happening in the government and saying, what other option do I have to preserve my wealth other than having my money in fiat cash that's going to inflate away? And I think that's going to unfold in the coming months and years for crypto. So that's why I think it's going to pump soon.
I think it's going to pump as well. I think also we're looking at, depending on what happens with China, and if we somehow this trade war pushes them into a recession, they'll unleash a fiscal stimulus that will be absorbed by cryptocurrencies.
Yep.
And we'll see something that moves. I actually think that down the road too, I'm pretty bullish on real estate in the US. And real estate really hasn't been moving. It's been really a kind of a dog. If you're, depending on where you're at, again, it's pretty regional, but a lot of the places that we're invested in the South, it's been either flat or it's kind of kicking along. And part of that is due to higher interest rates. My belief is that 6 months to 2 years, we're going to have a real estate increase that is going to be pretty surprising and exciting for people. So it's crazy. I think the last thing I'll say on this is that 100 days is a short period of time. A lot has been done. And to put it in perspective, like, I think that we haven't had, whether some of the things are right or wrong, a lot of action has been taken. And if you look at the tariffs example, there's been action taken and then action reversed, action taken, action reversed. And I think a lot of these things will follow the same kind of playbook, that even if things look bad now, there's been a clear path that the bad things get pulled back and new things get tried again. And I'm bullish about that, because we were on a path that was, I think most people could agree, not sustainable. And while it might feel like there's some pain in the markets, pain for the consumer in terms of pricing, I'm still pretty bullish on long term and what's going to happen here. So
I'm super bullish. I'm more bullish on the US than I think I've maybe ever been. And it's not because the US is perfect. It's because the US is still so much better than the rest of the world. When you look at our, our courts, when you look at our money, when you look at our schools, and I just complained about all of those during this episode, they're still light years better than almost everywhere else around the world. So if you're going to bet on somewhere, US is still the place to bet.
I look at some of these as like one-way or two-way doors. A lot of the tariff stuff that has impacted the markets, really easy two-way doors. You can go in, roll out the tariffs, and then pull them back. If they pulled back all the tariffs, it would absolutely, the markets would just rip and explode. So yeah, very interesting. I think we're in a strange time right now, but create some opportunity.
Yeah, and remember, fear is the time to act. And we had that market pullback.
I mean, just even if you just looked at, like, if you purchased a lot of crypto during that little drop, and if you bought SUI, you're up like 70% in a week.
Yeah, well, the stock market, I got some new positions a couple of weeks ago. Remember we had the big market pullback?
Yeah,
the 2 days. I piled into a couple of companies. They just got so cheap. They got so ridiculously cheap in a matter of 2 days. They're up like 30-40%. We'll see what happens the rest of the year. I'm going to hold on. But now is the time to act. Now is the time to be brave in the face of fear and try and get the bullshit that you see on media, on X, on Instagram, or whatever you're getting your rumor mill from, just try and take a step back, because there's
delete
huge
the app,
opportunity
start
right now.
drinking tea, baby.
Yeah, drink some tea.
Awesome. We'll wrap it up here, and one last call to action, which is, we've talked about this in the podcast for multiple weeks, but if you're looking for some sort of if you're looking to get off the apps and go do something interesting, month of May, we're challenging you to a 50-mile walk. And all that means is that you go out, find a path, and go do something hard. Take the day, push yourself, go walk 50 miles in a day. Guarantee on the end of that, you're going to remember what it feels like to get out and just push yourself a little bit. So if you want to join us, go to adventurecapitalist.com, shoot us an email, send you some more information, or just step up and find a place and go for a walk and email us about it. Message us, connect with us, tell us how it goes, and keep your head while other people are losing theirs.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We will see you on the next episode of the Adventure Capitalist Podcast.